Welcome to the Chamber of Schenectady County's Business Advocacy Council interview with Tom Jasiewicz, who is a candidate for the 110th Assembly District. I'm Jack Aernecke, and I'm pleased to be your host today. The Chamber's Business Advocacy Council is bipartisan and issue-focused, and today we'll be talking about issues that affect businesses in Schenectady County and around the Capital Region. Tom, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Jack. Pleasure being here.
Thank you. It seems to me that one of the really big issues anywhere around the area and indeed around the state is education. The businesses in Schenectady County need an educated workforce that they would hire from school, and yet they say, and I've heard this argument for years, that they have trouble finding qualified people. And they need those qualified people to be competitive not only locally but nationally and globally. So start off with, where does education sit as far as you're concerned as an issue?
Education is one of the highest priorities for me. I've actually campaigned on actually running against or stopping Common Core and focusing more on an education product that would be, assembled by educators instead of bureaucrats. Something where we're more concerned with our children instead of a set of rules or a set of criteria mandated down from the federal government. I agree with you wholeheartedly that an educated workforce is absolutely the focal point for businesses because training is very expensive. So the better the workforce is to start with, the better placement you're going to get, and the more competitive those companies are going to be. I saw a recent poll in the TU actually that showed that the majority, I think it was a very high number, about 94% of parents wanted to see more vocation in their schools. And yet I've seen schools, even locally, demolish their industrial arts wings. That's in contrast to what people are asking for. And that's another thing too. You have educated workforce, then you also have to have a skilled workforce. And we need that as well. If we're ever going to bring industrial jobs back, we have to have industrial skills.
Mm-hmm. So just to be clear, you are opposed to Common Core?
I'm opposed to Common Core as in the product that we have today. I don't think
What about the overall concept of a Common Core?
That's difficult. I think that you really need to let districts determine what's important to them, because I'm not sure in farmland in Idaho if the things they're learning are going to be the same things you're going to want to be learning in the inner city in New York. Mm-hmm. So I think that there are some common criteria that you should have. Of course, math, science, those things are universal. They're not products that can be tainted or personalized. My daughter, she's a fifth grader. Last year she studied the Erie Canal and the Algonquin Indians because they're germane to where we live. That makes sense. That wouldn't be something I'd want to teach in Alabama per se. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there should be some latitude as to what you teach. But I think the 3 R's that we always talked about as a kid, that needs to be common. And I know that's what Common Core focuses on, but they go further. They get into history and other things that I think that may not be germane to that locality.
Now, you say you would be in favor of talking to educators as opposed to letting bureaucrats create the system. And yet, in the United States, in science, 22 education systems are above the U.S. In reading, 19 other nations scored higher than U.S. students. 40% of kids going to state university need some kind of remedial help. Yeah. Isn't that an indication that the educators now are not quite doing the job they should be doing, and there has to be something else?
Well, there are already a great deal of government mandates on the schools that take away their focus and don't allow them to do what they need to do. There's also different districts are going to perform differently. When you look at localities, that's one thing, but the difference between, say, Niskayuna and Schenectady is a mile as far as the crow flies, but you look at the performance and a significant difference. Mm-hmm. A lot of those differences are based on dollars and how they're being spent and whom they're being spent on, as well as their ability to generate revenue from a tax base. Obviously, Niskayuna, their tax base is extremely strong, where in Schenectady, it's struggling. So you have a different dynamic there. Back to the schools. Now, when you look at what goes on in the schools, when you look at other nations that are performing better, you have to look at not just test scores. You have to look at the the way they're brought up, the time off they have. I mean, we have so many students who perform very well in our schools, but they also, say, play field hockey after school. There's so much extracurricular activity. It doesn't leave as much time for homework as you might have in these other nations. And we do spend a lot of time with our children focused on all these other things. There are a great deal of distractions. And not that I want to take them away, but it's a great deal of distractions, and it's just a cultural difference that you're going to find. And we can't have, if you were to take these nations and add all this extracurricular activity, I'm sure you'd see their academics would suffer somewhat.
And what about dollars? We have the gap elimination adjustment. We have the money that was taken away when the economy was really tight, and yet it doesn't seem to have been done equitably. You have 54% of Schenectady getting 54% of what it's entitled to. There's a district down on Long Island getting 110%.
Right.
How do you envision attacking that?
Well, first off, that is a problem we've had with New York legislators for years, is that an undue amount of money goes downstate out of the entire pot of money for education. That's something that needs to be changed. Second, the gap elimination adjustment, the money that was taken away should have come back. There was a plan, the Apple plan, that was proposed, and that Apple plan was going to give all of that money back and fully restore the funding to the schools. And many of the schools are struggling, even some of the better schools. I know Niskayuna has struggled with it, for example. These schools where the money was taken away were all of a sudden shackled with this burden of coming up with the money, and at the same token, they had the property tax cap that they had to fight as well. So it's, again, another example of the state mandating something, not only not funding it, but in this case, taking money away, and then once more saying, we're not going to give you the means to make up the difference. And those are the kinds of things we need to repair.
And how do you foresee being able to repair that?
Well, multiple ways. One, I would vote for the Apple plan, which would fully restore the funding that was taken away to start with. That way,
get back to where it was.
Correct.
Okay.
I would start right there. After that, then I would look into ways to save money in the schools. They're not all created equal. We go back to Common Core. Common Core has cost these districts money. There's a lot of money in the testing, and I know there's a lot of money in buying the materials. I know, for example, North Colony and Niskayuna both bought into a Singapore math program. And I know that this program cost Niskayuna, I think, around $60,000 if my sources are correct. That money could have been allocated for other things because math hasn't changed. I mean, last time I checked, we still put people on the moon with it, so it's pretty accurate. We can still use what we had before and still teach math accordingly. The dollars, when you can eliminate the wasteful spending, then you can lower the property taxes or not tax as much. That works in your favor because now your district becomes a favored district for people to build. When your property taxes are high, you're going to see more developments go up in areas around you versus in your district.
You mentioned mandated things too, and the governor has stated that the state is very good at telling local governments what to do, but not necessarily providing the money, as you alluded to,
Yes.
even though you didn't give the governor credit for basically saying that. But there has to be some mandate relief. Now, Medicaid, for example,
Right.
takes a huge amount of money out of
Absolutely.
every county. How do you see reforming that?
I'd like to see the state pay for it, just flat out. If the state's going to mandate something like that, then they need to pay for it or look at the mechanisms in which you can pay for it yourself. If they want to go outside of just a flat, we're going to mandate it, we'll pay for it, that's one way to do it. But you might find that certain districts, all districts, all municipalities have different say, financial demographics. A good example, we'll use Buffalo, for example, okay? You're going to find that the football stadium is in some election district. Well, that stadium generates a lot of money for everyone, but I'm sure that district does very, very well. That might be a place where if the state is going to be asked to chip in for the stadium, which they often are, then the state can say, okay, so much from certain sales maybe go to fund something else. And those are the kinds of deals you can swing within a particular special case.
But on a broad level, you say you would like the state to take that over, but still you have public assistance, you have child welfare protection, preschool special education, indigent defense, state pensions, youth detention.
I
There
have
are
a list of about 100,
other mandates that chew up really the majority of what any individual pays in property taxes that just go to the local government and go elsewhere.
In fact, I believe the number is above 80%
Yeah.
in Schenectady County, I believe. I'm not 100% certain. I heard that the other day. I haven't been able to chase it down, but about 80% of the money that comes in goes out to social services.
Okay, and assuming that that's correct, that's before a cop gets paid and that's before one piece of garbage is picked up.
Correct. And I understand that that's an enormous problem. One is you got to lighten up on the mandates. You got to stop mandating so much. All right, you have services. I'd like to see, in the form of services, I'd like to see like welfare reform, for example, something along the lines of, I know they use EBT cards now, which used to be food stamps before that. I'd like to see these things used for food. That would be a really good idea. I know that last year there was some problems where they were being used for lotto and liquor and even going to ATMs, taking out cash and using them at strip clubs. That's not what welfare was for. For years we've told it's been to feed the children. Well, you can't buy beer and feed your children. These are the kinds of things that it should be more staple foods. Once you start that, then maybe you won't need so much money in the school lunch program or the school breakfast program because they actually have food at home. And these are the kinds of, we'll call it trickle down. I don't want to equate that with Reaganomics, but we'll call it trickle down type things where if the money that we spend, because we do spend an absorbent amount of money, if that money's spent for what it's meant to be spent on, then many of these other things can fall in line, or you can dial them back a little bit, in turn putting more money in the coffers of the state. And when it's truly needed for some of the horrible things we've had happen between Superstorm Sandy, Hurricane Irene, the state has the money. They're not dipping into school funds to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. What do you see as the relationship between these mandates and education? The cost of the mandates versus the cost of education.
Well, the correlation is that the schools have to pay for it and they're not given the money, which means it comes out of property taxes. If the government's going to tell you, the state government that is going to tell you you have to do these things and you have to pay for it, they have to give us a mechanism to pay for it, which would be they have to raise property taxes. Those are the only choices. You're not going to pay for schools' textbooks with a bake sale. It's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. I'm not for increasing taxes, so I'd like to see either mandate relief or I'd like to see the government, which is holding back on money. They had a surplus this year. So they have a surplus this year and they're still holding money back in the GEA. Well, give it to the schools. You took it from them, give it back. It's our children that are looking for that money.
Do you see a role as a legislator in somehow influencing the Board of Regents, however you can, in making changes in the way the educational system works?
I can't say because we are obviously a minority, and you'd need a sweeping change in order to really gain any traction. But polling data has shown that the parents, the teachers, the unions are not in favor. And with that type of backing, in minority or not, I think we do have a voice, and I think we could work something out and we can actually make some changes for the good. I don't think that in the end, I know that they're talking about Regents diplomas for everyone. I don't think that's what's going to make the difference as much as a good education for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And just in conclusion, mm-hmm. I am a member of the Schenectady, in the broad sense, in the collective sense,
yeah.
as a member of the Schenectady Chamber.
Yeah.
And as a member of the business community. Why should I vote for you?
Well, there's multiple reasons. One, I'm a small business owner, very successful with my first business. I built it, and within a few years, I sold it. Took a few years, did some management for another larger firm, managed their operation. Took a few years off, got back into business. I own a small business again. It's doing very well. So I know what it takes to actually be successful in New York. And I know the ins and outs. I was a union worker for 10 years, so I've been on both sides. I was a foreman, so I've seen the management as a union foreman. I've seen the management as an operations manager. When you put the two together, I've seen both sides of how to make a business work and how to keep workers happy. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of thing that I would bring, that's the kind of experience I would bring to the legislature with me and use that to draw from, because I know the pains of both the workers and the employers.
Okay. Tom Jasiewicz, thank you very, very much for joining me today. I really appreciate the time, and we appreciate you sharing your thoughts and ideas on issues facing us in Schenectady and in the Capital Region. To see interviews with candidates for the New York State 46th and 49th Senate District, 110th, 111th, and 112th State Assembly Districts, and New York's 20th Congressional District, please visit www.schenectadychamber.org. And please remember to vote on Election Day, Tuesday, November 4th.